I can use a lot of words to describe the current state of Star Wars, most of them not very flattering, but the one that always comes to my mind is ironic. I still remember all of the excitement that circulated back in 2012 when Disney acquired Lucasfilm. Most people saw it as the beginning of a new era, one that would correct the mistakes George Lucas made when he developed the prequels for the original Star Wars trilogy, devoid of gratuitous CGI, over-the-top lightsaber duels, and commercializing thin characters in order to sell overpriced toys. So what's the irony, you ask? Well, I'd say Disney's come full circle and repeated all those mistakes for the Obi-Wan-Kenobi series, and then some. But as you can tell from the title of this video, I don't want to solely focus on what makes Kenobi a bad show. Rather, what makes it a bad prequel, how it fell into similar trappings as many other bad prequels, and why it takes a great deal of skill and forethought to get them right. I originally intended this to be part of my Writing Good Sequels video, but since all of Kenobi's been released and is such a good case study, I decided to devote an entire video exploring the many ways it breaks the narrative of the original Star Wars, and go through some possible solutions to all its writing issues, at the very least. I'll also be going through other prequel media to compare with the Kenobi series. So if you haven't seen the original Star Wars prequels, the Hobbit trilogy, the Hannibal TV series, the Golden Age arc of Berserk, Devil May Cry 3, Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII, Drew Karpyshyn's Mass Effect novels, or Halo, The Fall of Reach, here's a spoiler warning for all of them, because I'll be contrasting various aspects of their plots and characterization with Kenobi's. And while some of them are far from perfect, I'd still say they're at least decent additions to the original stories, for the most part. So, let's dive right in. Some people say you can't judge a full story until all of it's been released. But when I first heard about Kenobi's premise, it brought me to the same thought I had about Alien Covenant. What's the point in showing any of this? That's the most common stigma surrounding nearly every prequel, because when you break them down to their core, they're essentially an extended backstory to the events and characters already established in the first story. Since fans already know how everything's going to end up from the outset, it's up to the writer to create a compelling enough hook to get them to see where it all leads, and has to ensure the story they're telling complements the original narrative and characters, thus justifying the detour from the main storyline. So how does this relate to Kenobi and Alien Covenant exactly? Let me put it this way. If you're looking for examples of prequels that are broken from the very start, look no further than these two pieces of media. Kenobi is set approximately 10 years after the end of Revenge of the Sith, with Obi-Wan living a harsh but discreet life on Tatooine, as he watches over Luke Skywalker from a distance. His meat packaging and voyeuristic life gets put on hold, however, when he receives a message from Bail Organa to rescue Princess Leia, who was kidnapped by bounty hunters on Alderaan in the second most embarrassing chase scene I've ever seen put to film. And just like that, Kenobi's plot has gone completely off the rails. Obi-Wan shouldn't be leaving Tatooine under any circumstances, not just because of the insanely contrived reason I'll get into during my character breakdown, but because of the simple fact that during this period, there should be nothing more important to Obi-Wan than staying out of sight and keeping Luke safe. It was the sacred duty he swore to uphold at the end of Revenge of the Sith, not just to keep him safe from the Empire, but also as a means to redeem himself over letting Anakin go astray. Protecting Luke was his way to make up for all the mistakes that led to the fall of the Jedi, and to ensure one day he would get the chance to confront the Sith and set everything right again. Even if that meant lying to him about his father so he would have the strength to kill him. Right off the bat, the show was contradicting everything Revenge of the Sith set up, where Obi-Wan vowed he'd watch over Luke from a distance and continue his training with the Force to eventually become the wise old master we saw in A New Hope, who was all too eager to train him once he received Leia's message.
And what of the boy?
To Tatooine. To his family send him.
I will take the child and watch over him.
It's incredibly bullheaded for Bail to ask Obi-Wan, who at this point is one of the most wanted people in the entire galaxy, to risk everything to go save her when he's the regent of an entire planet who could easily give the task to one of his loyal guards or a trained bounty hunter. Zero consideration is given to the fact that if anything happened to Obi-Wan, Luke would be left unprotected, and worse, without a teacher who could easily reach him in the event the Empire discovered him. Not only is it nonsensical for Obi-Wan to be playing protector for someone he had no meaningful relationship with in the original trilogy, It's merely one of many massive plot holes this show creates in order to have this narrative.
General Kenobi, years ago you served my father in the Clone Wars. Now he begs you to help him in his struggle against the Empire.
How come you're not bringing up the elaborate adventure you two had together merely 9 years ago, Leia? You're addressing Obi-Wan like you only know him through your father, but he saved your life numerous times. And you developed such a close bond to him that you insisted to the Inquisitor who was about to torture you that he'd save you no matter what. I guess all that time traveling between different planets and fighting off hordes of stormtroopers together meant nothing to her, but then again, it would explain why she has next to no emotional reaction after his death in A New Hope.
I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan. We meet again at last. The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
It was only 9 years ago, Vader, and the first time you met since your duel at Mustafar, you completely trounced him in combat. He only won the second time because he suddenly remembered he's supposed to be Jedi Master Obi-Wan-Kenobi and had a bunch of rocks to pelt at you. He's turned gray, and you fixed your suit, but not much else has changed because he already knew how much of a tyrannical Sith Lord you are.
We must take them somewhere where the Sith will not sense their presence.
Split up, they should be.
Apparently, they weren't hidden very well, since all it took was one sadistic Inquisitor poking around the archives to figure out Obi-Wan and Bail knew each other, and that kidnapping Leia would somehow draw him out. You'd think a galactic empire that spends a great deal of time stomping out dissidents wouldn't stand for the leader of a planet being in league with one of the most wanted Jedi in the entire galaxy, and immediately arrest him and his family for treason. Rogue One already had the massive plot hole of Vader watching Leia's ship leave the battle over Scarif with the Death Star plans, but now their conversation after she was captured makes even less sense because Vader knows full well she's a rebel and, given her past history, should suspect that she's in this corner of the galaxy in order to find Obi-Wan. Kenobi is riddled with many more inconsistencies like this, and as it goes on, it becomes nakedly apparent that the writers only had Obi-Wan go on adventures with Leia and have pointless, lore-breaking slap fights with Darth Vader because they were only interested in exploring their nostalgic value, not exploring their characters on any deeper level. By the end of the series, nothing's really been accomplished other than returning to the status quo, unless you count all of the dramatic weight behind Obi-Wan teaching Luke about the Force, Leia's desperate message to rekindle hope in the rebellion, and his encounter with Darth Vader, all being sapped dry, just to be recontextualized in the worst way possible. I brought up Alien Covenant earlier, because like Kenobi, it recontextualized many things in the original Alien, which ended up robbing it of the mystique, scale, and wonder that made it such a great sci-fi horror movie. Look no further than the space jockey and the xenomorph itself, which went from unfathomable terrors beyond the stars, to a clumsy albino guy sitting in a chair, and the warped experiment of an autistic, homoerotic android.
And blow into the hole gently, like so. Watch me. I'll do the fingering.
Well, let's talk about killing it. We know it's using the air shafts. Will you listen to me, Parker? Shut up!
Let's hear it.
We'll move in pairs. We'll go step by step and cut off every bulkhead and every vent until we have it cornered, and then we'll blow it the fuck out into space. Is that acceptable to you?
Perfect organism. Its structural perfection is matched only by its hostility.
I admire Ridley Scott's ambition to want to tell this elaborate backstory, but there's no getting around the fact that if the answer to all the questions that made the original movie so amazing were really this base, and to be honest, dumb, I think we'd all be better off if they had never been answered at all. Sometimes, less is more in a story, and one of the core maladies surrounding most prequels is that even the best made ones inevitably end up diminishing some aspect of the original story by pulling on or merely shedding more light on narrative threads most people would have preferred to have been left alone. George Lucas was also guilty of this to an extent in his prequels, with many fans feeling the introduction of midi-chlorians and the celibate monk lifestyle of the Jedi seriously detracted from how they were first portrayed back in 1977. Personally, I'd say they only muddied the waters of the original mythology at worst. And even the people who outright hate them and the prequels can still take solace in the fact that they can still watch the original trilogy without those things impacting the events or characters in any significant way. The same can be said for Alien and Lord of the Rings for anyone who disliked Covenant and the Hobbit trilogy, but Kenobi goes much further than those prequels by sloppily inserting itself into the original Star Wars timeline, but giving no consideration to how its events blatantly contradict and harm the integrity of many of A New Hope's best scenes. Say what you want about Kid Anakin, and believe me, I have many issues with his characterization, but no amount of talking about angels or how much he hates sand had as much of a negative impact on his faithful encounter with Obi-Wan on the Death Star than the Kenobi series. But hey, it was all worth it, because we got to see the two of them clumsily swing ineffective glow sticks at each other like baseball bats, in a cheap, poorly lit Windows 10 backdrop, while the camera jitters all over the place like the director's got Parkinson's. Who cares about emotional stakes or the integrity of a story, because we got keys jingled in our faces. As a side note, I haven't seen action as poorly shot and edited as Kenobi since Taken 3. I fully admit, this is more of a personal pet peeve than a legitimate story critique, but even if Kenobi had the same masterful craftsmanship that made Battlestar Galactica's action scenes some of the best ever put to television, I would still call it a bad show because of all of its terrible storytelling decisions and how much it degrades the franchise it's attached to. Now don't get me wrong, there absolutely was potential to tell a good story about Obi-Wan during this time period that gave a deeper insight into his character. That's essentially what the Kenobi novel by John Jackson Miller did, showcasing his daily life on Tatooine, as he also struggles to overcome his lingering guilt over what happened to Anakin. I'm sure some people would say that sounds like a boring premise for a TV show, and I'll float around some ideas later on about how you can make it work, but the point I'm making is when writing a prequel, I'd say it's best for a writer to approach it in a similar fashion to writing a time travel story. Think about it. Both are opportunities for writers to go back into a character or world's past to see what they used to be like, and draw interesting parallels to what they ultimately become. In the same way Marty McFly has to make sure he doesn't tamper with anything in the past that could end up preventing him from being born in the present, or collapse the space-time continuum itself, prequels have to carefully re-establish familiar iconography from the first story before they can get to the real fun. And while certain things can be bent slightly for the story to be told, the entire premise comes crashing down if you meddle with too many things. That's how you usually end up with the more successful prequel stories, like Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII or Devil May Cry 3, where both of their intros were set up to be deliberate homages to their first game's openings, before diving into the biggest selling points: the early years of Zack's career as a super soldier enforcer, and Dante's freshman outing as a demon hunter. What makes these stories work so great as prequels is that while at first, it seems like going over their early adventures is just an excuse to show off bombastic fight scenes, some decent world building, and fun interactions with classic characters. As their stories progress, however, it becomes surreal watching major events that were merely teased before, like Sephiroth's betrayal, Zack's sacrifice, Virgil's obsession with power, and his eventual death by Dante's hands, play out firsthand, and witness the devastating impact it had on them and their worlds at large. It's one thing to simply hear about how Zack and Virgil's losses shaped Dante and Cloud into who they were at the beginning of their stories. But it's only after playing these games and seeing the full extent of who they are that the audience fully understands the underlying tragedy behind them. In fact, the original story ends up being enhanced by association, because now players have a deeper appreciation for characters they originally thought were one-note archetypes. That's the power a great prequel story can have. But unfortunately, Kenobi only manages to weaken its world and characters by association, and it goes much deeper than a bad premise. Like I said earlier, one of the biggest appeals behind prequels is getting to see what a beloved character or setting looked like before the events of the main story, even if the end result isn't great or doesn't add much to the grand scheme of things. I can't deny that learning more about a fascinating world's history or seeing the events that shaped the great character into who they become makes me a little more lenient towards their shortcomings. Both the Star Wars prequels and Hobbit trilogy suffer from numerous flaws: awkward dialogue, questionable directing choices, lackluster characterization for many of the side characters along with some of the leads, focusing too much on pioneering filmmaking technology than tightening up the story, and answering questions that didn't really need to be addressed, which ended up muddling the continuity in places. I don't consider either of them to be as good as their original counterparts, but when all is said and done, I still appreciate them for the aspects they got right, such as Obi-Wan and Bilbo's characterization, a broad overview of what Middle-earth and the Galactic Republic looked like in their prime and how they operated, and getting to see how certain moments that were only mentioned briefly in the main story play out, such as Bilbo finding the ring, Galadriel banning Sauron from Dol Guldur, Palpatine manipulating everyone so he could destroy the Jedi and create the Empire, and Anakin and Obi-Wan's final duel on Mustafar, which is what led Anakin to become the disfigured but terrifying Darth Vader we saw at the beginning of A New Hope, and Obi-Wan resolving to hide away on Tatooine with Luke so he could one day train him to defeat his father and bring balance to the galaxy. I'm sure many people would disagree with me, but I appreciate both these trilogies for what they are, and overall, I'd say they did more good than harm when it came to expanding the lore and getting new people into their franchises. Kenobi, on the other hand, has next to nothing to appreciate beyond seeing Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen reprise their roles. And I say that loosely because while they may be the same actors, they sure as hell aren't playing the same characters. If anything, their inclusion only makes Kenobi's bad storytelling decisions much worse. Because just like when Patrick Stewart portrayed Jean-Luc Picard as a demented, browbeaten android, watching McGregor portray Obi-Wan, his most iconic role, as a miserable, indecisive bum who failed the most important duty of his life, ends up solidifying the degrading pieces of Tumblr fanfiction that is Star Trek Picard and the Kenobi series as cancerous growths on their respective franchises.
If Leia is discovered...
I can't leave here, Bale. My duty is to the boy.
What about your duty to his sister?
My wife and I will take the girl. We've always talked of adopting a baby girl. She will be loved with us.
I can't.
She's my daughter, Obi-Wan.
I told you. I can't leave the boy.
This isn't about the boy, and you know it.
I will take the child and watch over him.
Until the time is right, disappear we will.
Fans who wanted to see what Obi-Wan and Darth Vader were doing in between episodes 3 and 4 suddenly got their wish, but little did they know it was through the monkey's paw. And anyone who was paying attention beyond the novelty of seeing these two on screen again realized how badly they were both butchered. Starting with Obi-Wan, we see he's been living the humble life on Tatooine, packaging alien meat for a living, and lying low in a decrepit cave when he's not working or checking on Luke. That's what episode 1 establishes. And all of that is fine by itself, until you get to the point where it's revealed Obi-Wan's cut himself off from the Force. I've seen many people who love this direction, but it makes no sense practically or thematically. On the practical side of things, I don't see how Obi-Wan is supposed to protect anybody when he has access to no weapons whatsoever. If Luke was ever kidnapped by Tusken Raiders, or say, a sadistic Inquisitor comes calling, I'd like to know what Obi-Wan's plan was. Considering Tatooine's the equivalent of Detroit in the Star Wars universe, I'd say it's pretty ill-advised to not practice all the skills he learned as a Jedi Master to protect himself, much less the last hope of the galaxy he swore to watch over. This is where we get into the thematic side of the argument, where Kenobi fans insist, but Obi-Wan's racked with guilt over what happened to Anakin and the Jedi, so it makes perfect sense he's lost touch with the Force, and his arc in the show is about overcoming his PTSD. Look, I'm a sucker for that kind of narrative when it's done right, but the problem is, it's not justified in Kenobi at all. I'm all for a story that centers around Obi-Wan working through his lingering guilt, but no amount of trauma should overshadow his duty to keep Luke safe, especially when he plans to train him in the future. It's become a habit for modern writers to write off a character being irrational or short-sighted due to their trauma, and there's no denying PTSD is a serious condition. The major issues with Obi-Wan's PTSD in Kenobi is that it comes and goes when it's convenient for the plot, constantly contradicts itself, and then gets resolved over the course of one conversation, never to be brought up again. Over the course of the first episode, Obi-Wan tells a runaway Jedi to just abandon the Force like he did. eagerly asks Owen if Luke is showing any signs so he can train him, tells Bail when he calls him to go save Leia that he isn't the same person, despite what he told Owen a few scenes ago, and then, even though he still has no grasp of the Force, decides screw it, I'm going to run off to rescue Leia, even though it was this guy's responsibility to look after her in the first place, all in the span of a few scenes in the first episode. Call me crazy, but if we're meant to believe Obi-Wan is so out of touch with his former self that he no longer has the will to use the Force anymore, I don't see how 2 conversations with Bail can suddenly make him disregard the most important duty of his life, and make him think he's in any condition to rescue Leia from mercenaries on a planet controlled by the Empire. Cutting yourself off from the Force is like taking a sledgehammer to all of your reflexes and senses. So in essence, Obi-Wan's going on a suicide mission. In their efforts to deconstruct Obi-Wan in the same abhorrent way they did to Luke in The Last Jedi, Disney's recreated all of the massive plot holes and inconsistencies with the characters and lore that ended up tanking that entire movie. And this is merely one of many ways Kenobi is essentially The Last Jedi 2.0. The only times the PTSD ever comes up again is in one scene in Episode 2 where Leia jumps off a building, which don't worry, I'll be getting into how this show ruined her character too. In Episode 3 as a poor justification for Obi-Wan standing around while Vader slaughters numerous innocent people and then prompts him to run away from him 3 separate times, just to hammer in how much of a bumbling, incompetent doormat he's become. And then at the start of Episode 4, where Obi-Wan's having trouble moving a little metal object, and his friend Tala tells him to just forgive himself, after which, he has no problem using the Force from then on. I'm not exaggerating for comedic effect. He literally goes from barely being able to move a coin to holding back the crushing pressure of the entire ocean in that same episode. If that didn't sound forced enough, Vader tells him at the end of the last battle that he was the one who killed Anakin Skywalker, relieving Obi-Wan of any responsibility whatsoever, and making his decision to leave him alive again even more unbelievably insane. Yes, of course he wasn't going to kill him before A New Hope, but the fact he even ended up in that situation at all just proves how badly Kenobi fits into Star Wars canon. Even when you put aside the other movies, and what George Lucas originally intended, that being Obi-Wan and Darth Vader never meeting until Episode 4, it's a terrible end to whatever arc Obi-Wan was supposed to have, and the message behind it makes even less sense. According to Kenobi, overcoming a deep-rooted trauma you blame yourself for requires having someone you barely know tell you to forgive yourself, and then leaving the person you feel so guilty over to go around terrorizing more people because you've moved on from that part of your life. I sure hope the people of Alderaan were content knowing they died so Obi-Wan could have his peace of mind. You know, maybe it's a good thing that Obi-Wan and Leia never met in A New Hope. Otherwise, she might have killed him herself for letting Vader live so he could oversee the destruction of her home world. That would have spiced up Luke's journey considerably.
Why, you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder!
Who's scruffy-looking?
I hope it's abundantly apparent that Obi-Wan's PTSD comes and goes when it's time for him to be a decrepit loser or a Force demigod as dictated by the plot. It serves no purpose beyond creating artificial tension in the early fight scenes since Obi-Wan's lost his step, and making him look weak and foolish next to the side characters. It's honestly insulting how often the show trivializes his inner conflict just so he can have light banter with Leia and constantly reaffirm how amazing she is. And oh boy, where to even begin with Leia? I want to state for the record, I don't blame the actress, because not even Natalie Portman or Jodie Foster at her age could have made any of the dialogue sound the least bit believable or her actions endearing in any way. Kenobi's version of Leia reminded me why I hated so many family sitcoms growing up, because in most of those shows, the child character's only role was to look cute, create problems other people had to fix, and claim to take responsibility for their mistakes, only to repeat them all over again in another episode. There are only so many times a kid character's obnoxious or irrational actions can be written off as them just being normal children, before it becomes clear the writer's only using them to generate cheap conflict and drama, and that encapsulates Leia's core function in Kenobi's story. It's made much worse by the fact that many of her decisions are passed off as clever and intuitive by the other characters, but they only make her look more naive and schizophrenic when you apply basic logic to them. Case in point, when Obi-Wan first rescues her in Episode 2, she starts off being very prissy and mistrustful towards him. Sure, It's a little off-putting that she isn't more grateful towards the man who claims to have been sent by her father and is leading her out of the compound, but I can believe she'd be a little cautious given everything she's been through. Several minutes later, however, while they're navigating the streets of the planet she was brought to, Kenobi Leia starts disobeying his instructions and wandering off by herself. Some people might chalk this up to her just being an inquisitive child, but consider their circumstances for just a minute. She's a 10-year-old girl who's just been kidnapped from her home planet by unpleasant mercenaries. And now here she is in an unfamiliar setting with absolutely no one to turn to except one man who she may not know very well, but clearly has her best interests at heart. I doubt any kid in that situation would be so eager to run off by themselves, especially in a place run by the Empire and bounty hunters. It's mostly playful laughs, but ends up sapping all the urgency out of the scene and makes Leia look stupid for not realizing how dangerous the situation is. Especially right after she tried to psychoanalyze Obi-Wan.
Can I try this one instead?
Half the city is looking for you. Put this on. The little green cape. You don't need those.
Don't touch anything.
You sound like my parents.
It devolves into an outright clown show when she sees his lightsaber and demands he make her float in order to prove he's a Jedi.
Why aren't you using your lightsaber? Maybe it's because you're not really a Jedi. Make me float.
What?
I want to float.
No.
You want him to like you, so you repeat what he says, even though you don't really know what it means. You think being like him will make people frightened of you, but really, you're the one who's scared. You've never made one decision for yourself in your entire life, and you never will.
Now, kids can be pretty oblivious to real danger for a fact, but asking the man who just rescued her from kidnappers to do something that would expose both of them on a hostile Imperial planet goes far beyond the realm of basic stupidity and makes Kenobi Leia look like she's mentally deficient. That was just my assumption watching that scene, but it pretty much gets confirmed later on when bounty hunters carrying Obi-Wan's wanted poster find them, and through some insane backwards logic, she deduces they kidnapped her in order to draw him out. And that must mean he's somehow connected to the other kidnappers, even though he just rescued her from them. Not to mention, 2 seconds ago, he just took out a bounty hunter that was after them. This culminates in Kenobi Leia running away from him as more bounty hunters pursue them, in a chase scene that wouldn't look out of place on Looney Tunes.
How do I know you're not the real kidnapper?
You have to trust me, Leia.
You aren't a Jedi.
Your father is a very old friend.
I don't believe you.
Leia.
Leia! No! Wait!
It's her. It's the girl. Just tell us where it is.
Leia!
No!
Leia, wait!
Leave me alone!
Stop!
A lot of YouTubers like to throw around exaggerated phrases like, "This is the absolute worst thing I've ever seen" in many of their videos. But I'm being 100% serious when I say the chase scene in Kenobi Episode 2 is one of the worst action set pieces I've ever seen put on camera, and only serves to destroy the intelligence and dignity of everyone involved. The Kenobi series desperately wants to make Leia this amazing and infallible child prodigy, but all it does is insult everything George Lucas did in the original Star Wars trilogy that made Princess Leia one of the most iconic female characters in all of cinema. I've seen many people try to argue that Kenobi Leia is the essential stepping stone for who she ultimately becomes, but when you look deeper into their personalities and actions, it becomes abundantly apparent these two aren't the same person. In the original trilogy, Leia was confident and assertive, but also compassionate and fiercely loyal to the people she loved, to the point where she'd be willing to do just about anything to help them. Sure, she was pretty critical of Luke and Han's sloppy rescue attempt in A New Hope, but after spending time fighting side by side with them, she grew to see them as valued comrades, and eventually close friends by the end. Kenobi Leia, however, constantly second-guesses every decision Obi-Wan makes, and rarely shows any gratitude for his actions, or any sense of compassion for what he's going through. The show tries to pass off that the two of them have developed a surrogate father-daughter bond, but the only meaningful conversations they have that don't center around pushing the story forward is Obi-Wan making vague statements about how Leia reminds him of her parents without going into much detail, constantly reaffirming how brave, smart, and loyal she is despite all the evidence to the contrary, and giving her fortune cookie caliber advice like, sometimes you can't trust people, or you can't run away from your problems forever. It's things like that, along with her other actions, such as pushing Obi-Wan to hitch a ride with an Imperial-loving stranger that gets them into conflict with stormtroopers in Episode 3, getting captured so Obi-Wan can meet the rebels and regain his powers out of nowhere to rescue her in Episode 4, and somehow managing to repair a rebel base's sabotage electrical systems by herself in Episode 5. That makes me see her as nothing more than a shallow plot device, who uses the fact that she's a child to obscure how thin of a character she really is. It's the same issue the Mandalorian ran into with Grogu, only it's far worse in Kenobi's case, because now it's tarnishing the legacy of characters who were well established in the original stories, just to make them fit the same dysfunctional formula Disney uses for all of their shows. You only have to compare how Darth Vader treats his adversaries in this series compared to any other story in Star Wars, to see how even he was neutered by Kenobi's new characterization of him. While it's not as egregious as what was done to Obi-Wan and Leia, Vader still gets infected many times with the incompetent evil villain bug to ensure each contrived plot point can happen. He's finally tracked down Obi-Wan after 10 years of relentlessly searching for him. What devious plan of revenge will he enact on his former master? Oh, he's just going to smack him around, cinch his arm a little bit, and then let him go. I'm a little shaky on that last part, because stormtroopers are still firing at Obi-Wan while the loader droid's carrying him away. So unless Vader's in on the meme that stormtroopers can't hit anything, I don't see any reason why he isn't going after them, especially when he can just walk around or put out the fire like he did earlier. Obi-Wan's attacking his Imperial base on Mustafar. How will he stop him? Oh, he's just going to sit back and let his irrational Grand Inquisitor handle it, even though that won't make any sense because of an upcoming twist in the next episode. It becomes much dumber when he spares Reva for letting the man he wanted most escape because she planted a tracker in Leia's toy, even though she couldn't have possibly known Obi-Wan would successfully infiltrate their base, and is useless anyway because they already know where he's going to take the kidnapped princess of Alderaan. Obi-Wan and the rebels are fleeing right in front of him. What's he going to do? Oh, just play around with Reva, reveal he knew she was going to betray him all along despite all the responsibilities he gave her and all the time she disobeyed his orders, and just leave her alive with the same wound she survived as a child, which still makes no sense. What makes that scene even more ironic is that Vader let Reva live so they could find the rebels, and when he actually starts pursuing them in the next episode, he lets them go so his entire Star Destroyer can chase after Obi-Wan's little shuttle, just in case you needed more proof about what a clown show the Empire and the Rebellion has devolved into. Now, many have argued the original Star Wars prequels did plenty of damage to Vader's image, with how whiny and sociopathic Anakin Skywalker was portrayed. I admit I wasn't the biggest fan of learning how much he hated sand, his tantrums toward the Jedi Council, and his awkward romance with Padme, but I've always said, while the prequels stumbled quite a bit when it came to the smaller details, they overall captured the broader picture of how Anakin became Darth Vader. Swearing undying loyalty to Satan incarnate and committing genocide definitely needed to be fleshed out better, but Anakin willing to do anything to save his wife from dying in childbirth was still a believable motivation, just one that needed more credible build-up. Even the most die-hard prequel haters could distinguish the cunning, menacing tyrant Vader was portrayed to be in the original trilogy from his humble beginnings if they really wanted to. But Kenobi crosses that line and makes the man in the suit himself as incompetent as an Austin Powers villain. And even then, Fat Bastard got his targets. When all is said and done, Kenobi commits the most unpardonable sin of any prequel, undermining some of the most beloved characters in all of cinema by reducing them to generic archetypes for a formulaic and uninspired story, while also trying to deconstruct them, but without any nuance or meaningful depth that gives any real insight into who they are as people. And in many instances, it would have been better off to not see just how careless, irresponsible, and outright stupid many of them turned out to be. Even minor characters like Bail Organa and Aunt Beru, of all people. Given how often they endanger the ones they've sworn to protect, it's a miracle Luke and Leia even managed to survive all the way up to A New Hope. Then again, I can't blame them, because the people writing for them now aren't the same ones who created them. And when that fact becomes apparent in any story, it becomes next to impossible to get invested in anything that's happening to them, because any attentive audience member can see there's a fundamental disconnect between what they know and what the writer thinks they know about the same character. I know I've been tearing apart pretty much every aspect of this show, but believe it or not, the Kenobi series was the only Disney Plus project I was anticipating to see. Obi-Wan's always been my second favorite Star Wars character of all time, and a big contributor to that was Ewan McGregor, who even the most ardent prequel haters can't deny was one of the best aspects of that entire trilogy. Kenobi is chock full of issues: a broken premise, bad characterization, the complete disregard for past canon, slapshot directing, whatever the hell this is supposed to be. And the list goes on and on. Above everything else, however, I'd say the biggest issue with Kenobi is that when you really get down to brass tacks, this isn't his story. Sure, he's featured prominently in it and has a big influence on many of its plot points, but he's not the one pushing events forward, or undergoes any serious change aside from some fake PTSD nonsense. No, that honor goes to Reva, the newest addition to Disney's grand pantheon of supposed strong female characters in Star Wars. You know, aside from all the other ones that were infinitely better written and developed, but I'm getting ahead of myself. There's been a growing bait-and-switch trend in Disney's most recent projects, where they announce a new movie or TV series about a fan-favorite legacy character, only to introduce a lesser-known side character who just so happens to fit the mainstream media's criteria for diversity, and they end up replacing said legacy character as the protagonist in their own story. Reva's the one who kickstarts Kenobi's plot by hiring the mercenaries to kidnap Leia in order to draw out Obi-Wan. Her goal is to capture Obi-Wan and bring him before Darth Vader by any means, raising her status as an Inquisitor against the wishes of her peers. Now, if she were just a secondary villain next to Darth Vader, I wouldn't be bringing any of this up. But by the end of the series, it becomes clear that she's the central character of Kenobi, not Obi-Wan himself. What do I mean by that, you may ask? Well, the protagonist of any story is usually the character that has the most influence on the major plot events, and typically goes through a significant change by the end. Everything Reva does, from kidnapping Leia, killing the outcast Jedi, sending bounty hunters after Obi-Wan, revealing to him Anakin's Darth Vader, which Obi-Wan already knew but the writers forgot that just like everything else, and tracking him and Leia from planet to planet are all in service to telling her story and how determined she is to get what she wants. The show glosses over how overcoming these challenges influences Obi-Wan's arc like any other hero story, and is more focused on showing how Reva's actions influence her standing with the other Inquisitors and Darth Vader. I'm sure all of this must seem like nitpicking, or racism, according to Disney, because apparently, no one can criticize Reva without bringing up her race, you know, despite all the other black characters in Star Wars. But the one thing that cements the Kenobi series as Reva's story instead of Obi-Wan's is the reveal of her backstory, and how it completely recontextualizes everything across the entire show. At the beginning of episode 1, it's established that she has an abnormal fixation on tracking down Obi-Wan. Even though the other Inquisitors tell her to let it go and focus on the Jedi they're hunting at present, she still goes ahead with her plan to kidnap Leia in order to draw him out, and spends every scene doing everything she can to track him down, even a faithful reenactment of Batwoman.
Parkour! 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 Extreme! Parkour! 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 Parkour!
You might think all of this is just her being a determined villain, but in episode 5, it's revealed that she was actually one of the young Jedi pupils who was at the temple during Order 66 when Anakin and the clone troopers were slaughtering all of the Jedi. She watched him kill all of her friends before being stabbed in the chest herself, which she somehow survives, and blames Obi-Wan for not being there to stop it, even though Miss I read the archives and know everything about Obi-Wan Kenobi should know full well he was off fighting General Grievous to end the Clone Wars at the time. And there's no way she can know the particulars of his relationship with Anakin that led to him falling to the dark side, unless she watched Revenge of the Sith herself. Oh, but the pièce de résistance is that she became a Sith Inquisitor so she could get close to Darth Vader, and take revenge for him killing all of her Jedi friends. And everything she's done in this series has been in service to that one goal.
We're not under the Empire's...
You would kidnap an Imperial Senator's child?
We've done worse.
Help! Somebody help, please!
I'm sorry, Leia, I really am.
You did this to yourself!
What are you doing to me?
Kenobi desperately tries to make Reva out to be this intimidating, clever, and badass Sith Inquisitor, and failed miserably. But by the halfway point, it suddenly flips the script and tries to make her out to be this tragic, morally great character, despite there being no basis for it whatsoever. Things only get dumber when Vader and the Grand Inquisitor reveal they knew who she was all along and were merely using her to do their dirty work. I guess that makes sense, given her inexplicable ability to read minds and goofy parkour skills, but I'm not seeing how that plan paid off given all the times she deliberately disobeyed them, and when she stabbed the Grand Inquisitor himself, unless he somehow counted on surviving 1,000 degrees of heat burning a hole through his chest. Then again, Reva managed to do it twice, so what the hell do I know about lightsabers? And more importantly, what the hell does Disney even know about them? All of this insanity comes to a head in Episode 6, when Reva manages to track down Luke on Tatooine. And I'm sure by now, I don't need to reiterate how stupid everyone in the story had to be for this to happen, but just for the hell of it, I'm sure you can make a good case against Obi-Wan, Bail Organa, Aunt Beru, and Uncle Owen for child endangerment at this point. Luke gets knocked down as he's trying to get away from her, and just before she can kill him for some sort of justice that wouldn't make sense even if the show gave a half-assed explanation for it, she flashes back to when Anakin was killing her friends, and then sees herself in Luke's position, just to hammer home how much the writers don't trust the audience to be able to put two and two together themselves. She breaks down in front of Obi-Wan about how she couldn't bring herself to do it, despite all the other evil things she's done across this series, and then goes on her merry way, capping off the most patronizing, unearned redemption story I've ever seen. So yes, by the end of the Kenobi series, it was Reva who saved Luke, and through her journey of disarming innocent women, mind-probing a street urchin, torturing Leia, and relentlessly pursuing Obi-Wan, she learned to overcome her tragic past and move forward with her life. And what did Obi-Wan learn in this gripping story, you may ask? Well, he rescued Leia and gave her some advice on how to live her life, but that just amounted to him playing babysitter for most of the series. And she's still precocious and annoying by the end, so that's not much of an arc. Not to mention, there's no justified reason why it had to be him who rescued her and abandoned Luke, which is what led Reva to find him in the first place, so... Oh, he mowed down a bunch of stormtroopers along the way, although that's not much of an accomplishment, considering they're about as effective at injuring the main cast as the Putty Patrol and Power Rangers. You know what? I've got it this time. He managed to overcome his lingering guilt over Anakin's fall and the destruction of the Jedi Order, which inspired him to use the Force again. Even though that's a nonsensical arc manufactured by this show that doesn't line up with anything established about his character at all, and it just took having a conversation with two characters who in essence just told him to get over it, one of which was with a stranger he met the previous day. Well, I tried. But do you see what I mean when I say Obi-Wan's a pathetic side character in his own series? He's just a tool whose only purpose is to provide laborious distractions in between all the major events dedicated to telling Reva's story, which in itself is terrible because she's a horrible human being with next to no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Some might say she's no more redeemable than Darth Vader, but the key difference between her and Vader is that while he was a tyrannical Sith Lord, he couldn't bring himself to kill his own son, even on Palpatine's orders. And in the end, he was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, because Luke made him see there was someone he cared about other than himself, and that connection was more important to him than any loyalty he'd sworn to the Emperor. In Reva's case, however, her redemption is completely self-motivated, and has no basis outside of one split second where she briefly hesitates before torturing Leia, but still decides to do it anyway, so I'd hardly mark that in her favor. Besides, she hasn't shown any aversion towards harming children or innocent people in the past, so you can't even make the argument that she's not willing to cross that particular line. The point I'm trying to make is that even though Reva has the closest thing to an arc out of anyone in Kenobi, it still suffers from all the abiding issues that plague every other plot point in this show, and taken as its own story, it would still be terrible because of how poorly laid out it all is, and how much it degrades the universe it's attached to. And when you get right down to it, that sums up the entire Obi-Wan-Kenobi series. You know what the ultimate twisted irony of the Kenobi series really is? Everything's back to the way it should be by the end. Obi-Wan's the wise, reclusive master protecting Luke on Tatooine, Leia's safe with her parents on Alderaan, even though they should all be arrested now that the Empire knows for a fact they're connected to Obi-Wan, and Darth Vader's traveling across the galaxy, gaining notoriety as the Emperor's ruthless enforcer. I should be satisfied because everything's been set up to lead straight into A New Hope, but now I'm left with all these lingering thoughts about everything that had to happen across this show in order to get to this point. I can't get as invested into Luke and Obi-Wan's bond because I now know deep down he didn't care for him that much, to the point where he was flashing back to Leia instead of him when he thought he was about to die. Not to mention his negligence in upholding his duty nearly got him killed as a child. Every time I see Leia's acts of strength and heroism in A New Hope, I can't stop thinking about how idiotic and annoying she used to be merely 9 years ago, nor get over the fact she never once brought up any connection she had with Obi-Wan even while Luke was grieving his death. But worst of all, Obi-Wan and Darth Vader's faithful encounter on the Death Star doesn't really mean anything anymore, because they already settled all their past grievances in their last encounter. And once you strip away the dramatic component of master and student finally reuniting after spending years apart carrying the scars they left on each other from their last battle, that being Anakin's disfigurement and Obi-Wan's harsh discovery of his closest friend's true nature, as their old lives came crashing down around them, you're just left with a geriatric and a cripple clumsily slapping glow sticks against each other. Man, it sure was lucky for Vader that Obi-Wan didn't have any boulders handy. Otherwise, he would have been tossed around like a pathetic chump again. That right there is one of the worst things any prequel can do to an original story, cheapening various plot points and characters you were once invested in, and then introducing numerous warped ideas that completely recontextualize everything you understood about them, which makes the narrative much more convoluted and often dumber than you initially thought it was. This can easily happen to any story regardless of the author's intent, which is why so many people don't care for any kind of prequel. The most tragic thing about it is that when implemented right, prequels absolutely have the potential to drastically improve any story or character that may seem boring or one-dimensional at first glance. When Guts is first introduced in the Black Swordsman arc of Berserk, he comes across as little more than a bloodthirsty, raving psychopath who'd stoop to any level of cruelty and sadism to kill the demons that roam the land, even towards his allies and the benevolent elf who travels with him. There were hints that he was a much more complicated man deep down, but it's only after experiencing the Golden Age arc that you can fully understand how he became the malicious Black Swordsman, through his rough upbringing as a child soldier, the betrayal of his father figure who tried to murder him after years of abuse, his harsh life as a roaming mercenary, and his survival of the hellish eclipse, where he was forced to witness all the people he once cared about be torn apart by demons, and the brutal violation of the love of his life by his once best friend Griffith, which reduced her to a deranged madwoman. That storyline elevated Berserk from a gratuitous yet straightforward tale of a violent monster hunter to a fully realized cosmic horror dark fantasy tragedy. When I played Halo 2 and 3 as a kid, I never found the Covenant to be particularly interesting or scary, just silly cannon fodder across my multiple playthroughs of each game. It wasn't until I read The Fall of Reach when I got to see their eerie introduction and how they drove humanity to the brink of extinction that I began to see them as something more. Same with the Master Chief, who grew on me as a character instead of a stoic one-line dispenser after seeing his early years as a Spartan. I wouldn't put Halo on the same level as Star Wars or Mass Effect, but those early books did help me see it had much greater depth than I originally gave it credit for. Speaking of Mass Effect, I didn't have any expectations going into the books other than learning more about certain events and characters that were briefly featured in side content across the games. After reading them, I suddenly had a deeper appreciation for David Anderson as a resolute career soldier, Saren Arterius as a cruel yet efficient Spectre, Kaylee Sanders as an incredibly resourceful woman who makes the most out of every terrible situation she gets roped into, and the devious lengths the elusive man would go in order to do what he thought was best for the rest of humanity. Mass Effect Retribution even managed the impossible task of making Kai Lang an engaging and intimidating villain compared to his obnoxious Kylo Ren-esque incarnation from Mass Effect 3. Then there's the more experimental variety of prequels like the Hannibal TV series, which many argue is just as good, if not better, than the Oscar-winning Silence of the Lambs. Personally, I go back and forth between which one I prefer more, but I can say with no reservation that Mads Mikkelsen's portrayal of Hannibal Lecter is just as captivating as Sir Anthony Hopkins. And they both manage to steal every scene they're in, regardless if it's across 3 seasons of a premiere television series or merely 21 minutes in a gripping crime thriller. The common thread between these 4 prequels, on top of being incredibly well written and structured, is their keen understanding of what made their original stories so successful, by only expanding on specific details that lend towards deepening their respective mythologies, while leaving other details, such as Hannibal's true backstory, the Master Chief's face, the precise use and application of Reaper technology, and the full origin of the God Hand, at least not yet, in order to preserve the mystique the original story had when the viewer first experienced it and asked themselves these same questions. My point is, these stories are all why I don't write off prequels at first glance, and why I'm always willing to give the ones that show the most promise a fair chance. Had the Kenobi series been about Obi-Wan fending off Tusken Raiders or Inquisitors while trying to remain inconspicuous on Tatooine as he continues his Jedi training to commune with Qui-Gon beyond the grave, I would have been all for that. It would have been a great opportunity to have Clone War flashbacks, explore his rocky relationship with Uncle Owen, and provide fun action and introspective character drama across 6 or more episodes. Whether the writers working at Disney today could actually pull it off is an entirely different story, but at least I wouldn't have been completely against it like I was with the Kenobi we actually got from minute 1. Once every trailer and interview made it very clear it wasn't going to be a nuanced, introspective look into his character. No, we unfortunately ended up with a variety of prequel that's no different from countless modern Hollywood remakes, reboots, and sequels. The kind of cynically produced product that mainly exists to exploit the fans of a once-beloved franchise, and reinterpret various aspects of the original work that ends up diluting the whole thing with one-sided political ideologies and backwards messaging. Look no further than all of the major press releases about Obi-Wan and Darth Vader's rematch that never should have happened at all, and the overblown controversy surrounding Reva's character to see where Disney's priorities truly lay when it came to shelling out this series. That's not to say earning profit wasn't a priority for the other prequels I mentioned, but if that's really all you're basing its entire existence on, then it's no wonder the number of actual good prequels is very scant. Just like with any story, they require an attentive writer, one who has a keen understanding of the original, so they can create a gripping narrative that enhances it by proxy. That's what the Kenobi novel understood and pulled off years ago, and I still highly recommend it over the TV series any day. Thanks for watching. More reviews and recommendations are on the way, and I greatly appreciate everyone who supported me ever since I started making these videos. You can send me any suggestions or feedback on my Twitter page, and rest assured, this is only the beginning of where I want to take this channel. I'm the Elusive Eye, and I'll see you next time.